Hello and welcome to Talking SoS, a video series on the science of security with Shawn Riley. Today in this episode, we want to talk about cyber threat intelligence and languages, taxonomies, frameworks for representing and understanding cyber threat intelligence. We also want to kind of look at cyber threat intelligence through the lens of strategic, operational, and tactical cyber threat intelligence, and kind of look at a couple examples to understand what we mean when we say those different lenses that we're looking through. So the first aspect of cyber threat intelligence I want to talk about is a cyber threat intelligence language called STIX, the Structured Threat Information Expression, currently on version 2.0, being developed out at OASIS. This is a machine-readable format, JSON and JSON schema, which makes it really a type of taxonomy for representing cyber threat intelligence, a taxonomy as well as a structured language for representing instances of cyber threat intelligence. And it's designed to represent, information about the adversary, such as the threat actor, the campaigns that they run, and the intrusion sets or groups that they kind of belong to. It's designed to represent the TTPs that they use, or the attack patterns and malware and tools that they use, and really kind of what kind of vulnerabilities that those things target, as well as courses of action that can mitigate those vulnerabilities. So STIX is great. It's a way to automate the exchange of threat information and share threat information with others using the Taxi server and Taxi protocol. Another way that we often look at threat intelligence in an aspect, or at least focusing in on adversary tactics and techniques, is using taxonomies such as MITRE's enterprise attack or MITRE's pre-attack, where you're looking at primarily the tactics and techniques, or the objectives and actions that the adversaries will do to achieve those objectives. So if we look on the screen here, this upper row here represents the tactics or the objectives of the adversary as they move through time across a cyber attack lifecycle, and these down here are all the techniques or the activities that the defender or that the adversary will do in order to achieve the objective or the tactic. So MITRE's attack is really great, but it's they also identify all the groups that are known to do different tactics and techniques, and what the specific tactics and techniques that they've been observed doing. They don't get into these are the different campaigns that they ran, and these are the indicators for the different techniques. It's not that type of knowledge repository. It really focuses in on the tactic and technique level. When we get into things like cyber threat frameworks, these are really used to consistently categorize and characterize cyber threat events using a common framework to represent really the full spectrum of cyber threat intelligence, simplified to kind of 4 layers. And so they really represent kind of layer 1 here as the stages of the cyber attack lifecycle, or the cyber kill chain. And this particular one is the ODNI cyber threat framework, and they've simplified the stages of the cyber attack lifecycle, or the cyber kill chain, down to 4 primary stages: 2 before the boom and 2 after the boom. So you see the very first stage of the cyber attack lifecycle is preparation, and that's really where the adversary is doing things like planning and target selection and information gathering. The next stage of the cyber attack lifecycle is engagement, and this is really where that adversary is going through and establishing OPSEC, and they're establishing their persona accounts, and they're setting up and deploying their infrastructure to support operational deployment and testing and deploying their capabilities to making sure that they're ready. So that way they can launch the cyber attacks. This kind of dotted line here in between the two on the one side and two on the other side represents the boom, left of intrusion, right of intrusion. The third stage of the cyber attack lifecycle in this framework is presence. This is where the adversary is working to establish a presence in the victim's enterprise. So that way they can then have some kind of effect or consequence on that victim, right? And this layer one stages, during each one of these stages, the adversary is going to have certain objectives that they're going to attempt to achieve, and these are the objectives of the adversary. If we were doing a mapping between the ODNI cyber threat framework here and the MITRE enterprise attack model that we saw on the other screen, these objectives would be mapped to the tactics along that top line. And then down here on layer 3 is where we get into the actions. These are the actions that the adversary will do in order to achieve the objective during that stage of the cyber attack life cycle. So these actions would align to the techniques area of MITRE's attack, or the attack patterns area of STIX 2.0. Layer 4 is the indicators. These are the indicators for the activities or the techniques or the attack patterns that align to the objectives or the tactics that align to the stages of the cyber attack life cycle. So you can instantly start to think, well, gosh, an analyst or a practitioner, a cyber threat intel analyst, if they're working with these different languages and taxonomies and frameworks, they kind of have to understand how to use them interchangeably and how to think across these different models. And when we start thinking about, the actual instances of cyber threat intelligence, we then have to kind of look through a couple different lenses, one of them being kind of that strategic cyber threat intelligence. And there's going to be people out there that say, I don't really care about the strategic stuff. I don't care about tracking these adversary groups and stuff. I just care about the indicators and whether I can defend with the knowledge that I have or not. But for a lot of people out there, we really care about tracking the adversaries, and there's a whole community around the Cyber Threat Alliance, Unit 42 out of Palo Alto and others, that are producing these adversary playbooks. And really, I kind of think of the adversary playbook, it's really like a sports team's playbook. So everything that Unit 42 kind of knows about oil rig, for example, which is this intrusion set or adversary group or APT group called oil rig over here, and it's a description of what oil rig is here. These are the campaigns, the 4 campaigns that the oil rig group have ran, and the dates of those campaigns. For this particular top one that's selected, we can see the tactics and techniques along the cyber kill chain. We can see kind of a summary for oil rig that there's been 4 campaigns, that there's 134 indicators in here that you could drill down into, and 23 different attack patterns or techniques that have been observed used by this group. But this ability to take everything that's kind of known about all the different plays that this group have ran and capture those in an adversary playbook is really kind of that essence of what strategic intelligence is about. It's about being able to track this group, this adversary group, over time across their different campaigns, so you can see how their tradecraft has changed or matured or perhaps even decreased over time. Perhaps they had a loss in their team members. Maybe they lost tradecraft to another team. they're all different ways that you can track those teams over time and understand how they have changed in their use of tactics and techniques, so that way you can then operationally think about how you can defend against those as their tactics and techniques change. What are you doing to make sure that you're matching and keeping up to date with the changes that you're seeing? And that kind of brings us into looking at things from an operational standpoint, where I often think about things like the cyber effects matrices, which is what we're seeing here when I think about using threat intelligence in an operational context. So as the adversary moves through the cyber attack lifecycle, through the 4 different stages of that ODNI cyber threat framework, as they try to achieve their different objectives as they move through time, I want to understand that if I have threat intelligence, or if I've deployed security controls and investments in analytics, like analytics and monitoring and damage control and assessments, and different resiliency techniques and approaches and courses of action and intelligence to have different types of effects, I want to understand what are the specific effects that I can actually have. What can I detect as the adversary moves through the cyber attack life cycle? If I can't detect it, then it's a gap, right? And if I can detect it, can I respond to it, right? So do I have incident response plans that can do things like contain or expunge the adversary or recover the systems in the business? This is where we can look at, do I have that ability to protect, detect, respond, and recover using intelligence and using my security controls and my courses of action, everything that's at the defender's disposal within their cyber ecosystem. You want to understand that if you're having some kind of activity in response to a threat actor, what's the effect of that activity on the threat actor? So that way, after you have that or take that action, you want to be able to go and look to see how effective you were at achieving that effect on the adversary's activity. Right? If you take a course of action designed to contain the adversary, you should be able to go and look for evidence that the adversary's been contained, and that will tell you how effective that action that you just took was at achieving the desired effect, right? If the adversary wasn't contained, then you would be able to note, based on the evidence, that that course of action was not effective in containing the adversary. So, and when we think about the use of different types of threat intelligence and indicators within the cyber environment, we really have to think about cyber threat intelligence from kind of a tactical perspective and understand how and where different types of threat intelligence is used within the cyber terrain, right? So when we think about network-based indicators, things like MAC addresses are down here at this layer 2 level. The data link layer, IP addresses are down here at layer 3. Things like, HTTP web pages are up here at layer 7. When we think about, sensors on the motherboard, such as BIOS or on your processor chips, that's layer 8. When we think about system level signatures, such as going in and looking for registry keys or files on the operating system, that's layer 9. When we're looking for particular applications, such as searching for MD5 hashes or whatever, we're often searching for software applications hash. You might be searching for different types of persona within your environment, user IDs, email addresses, that type of things. It's a really kind of understanding where are the data feeds and data sources of security related information in my cyber ecosystem, and where can I use different types of information in which types of security controls at which layers, right? This model of the cyber ecosystem provides kind of a common model of the cyber environment for analysts to discuss and talk about where sensors and data feeds and data sources and different things are within the cyber ecosystem, using these layers of terrain that kind of frame cyberspace as layer 2 through layer 11, wedged between two real-world objects of the physical device at layer number 1 here, and the physical person at layer 12. And that really kind of helps defenders think through, where different things are at and where they might want to look for information or apply threat intelligence in their ecosystem. If you got something coming in through the network, going all the way up to becoming a session, to becoming something that's passed out and put together from all those raw packets into and sent to an application, so that way it can be processed by that application on some device and presented finally to a person. That activity and that communication has gone through a lot of different layers of the cyber ecosystem and passed by a lot of different sensors. And so it gives you the opportunity to look for information across these different layers. So anyways, that was just kind of a quick overview and review of cyber threat intelligence. Thanks for your time, and see you next time on Talking SoS.